leadership has taken a different context, a different speed, a different velocity with respect to age profile. And that seems to have been happening. I mean, it's always been the case, you know, entrepreneurs come in at very early ages, some just get on with getting into leadership, they get into entrepreneurship, you know, and so on. They lead companies, starting companies, or you get, you know, younger fast trackers, sometimes with fantastic opportunity to have the right mentorship to allow them to do that. And I think ageism is, has changed in many, many ways, because people would expect that, oh well, how could you not, you couldn't be at this role unless you're over 50, or unless you're over 40, or something like that. But that's changed, partly through technology, partly through people being able to get a lot more exposure in time. Because you tend to find leadership usually is not necessarily about how old an individual is. It comes down to how much exposure they've had in time, the velocity of exposure and execution of what they do, and the outcomes they achieve. One thing technology has done is, and the world of technology as it's emerged, and the internet, it's enabled the speed of learning to improve significantly, and the speed of getting digital mentorship, for want of a better term, to be much quicker. That means we're getting younger and younger people able to take on leadership roles. And in fact, you don't have to have physical contact to have access to, or to be able to mentor individuals. You can actually now do it digitally, especially what's shown in the last year. In personal experience, many years ago, in the 90s, early 90s, I was in Capgemini in the UK. I remember being the youngest principal consultant at the time at the age of 29. And by the time we've gone through, and you know, typically principal consultants would be around about 40. Okay? By the time we went through the 90s, it was now pretty standard to have 30-year-olds as principal consultants. And you get them becoming associate directors that would be the reserve of 50-year-olds. Quite a lot driven through access to information and technology that enables an individual to grow at a high velocity, to get mentorship and take on leadership roles. So, going into Yusu's presentation, in summary, what we now have is a whole range of very dynamic, younger, well-exposed individuals in director and leadership roles that actually also have the energy and the belief that, sometimes clouded by experience, that anything can be done at any speed of time or even at the speed of now. So going into the discussion, we'll take the presentation from Yusu for around 15 minutes. We'll have comments from Oswald, and we will also have some from Etop. He's online, great to see him. And then we'll open the presentation, the discussion to the floor generally. Thank you very much. Over to you.
Thank you very much, my dear brother. So my presentation will speak to, we'll talk about, I'll give you a background, you know, a canvas, painted canvas around which we can all, you know, anchor our thoughts as we go through the presentation. And then I'll speak a little about technology, the disruptions, what's going on in the space in very general terms, because that is an important factor. Then there are population issues. There are certain trends that, you know, that revolve around our current reality, especially in Africa, and especially around what millennials are. And then we'll talk about generally globalization, and I'll come up with a few recommendations around how to tap the potentials of millennials, and then, you know, I'll conclude in a general way so that will enable the panelists to speak on it. So next slide. Okay, so I think everybody, this slide I think everybody would agree with. I think there's nobody who would disagree that, you know, we currently live in a period of great changes. You know, the rate of change, you know, on a daily basis. You wake up, you don't know what to expect. Pandemic has put that, especially into context, life has never been the same since it came, and it has formed the basis for accelerating change in so many facets of life. And then, of course, you still have technology, population, and the general disruption to business models. We as directors in this know how many businesses have been taken out of business due to disruptions in their business models by the creation of platforms. Next slide, please. Next slide. Okay, so we'll talk about, who's controlling the slides, please? All right, so the first thing we'll talk about is technology. Now, everybody must have heard of the fourth industrial revolution. 4IR, many comes with many, even if you haven't heard of it as a total package, I'm sure you've come across the sub-technologies that will eventually form the basis for that. You've heard of augmented reality. 5G is the most popular one, especially during COVID. Now we're talking about 6G, blockchain technology, cryptos, name it. All these things are things that are fundamental to the creation of what is now panning out as the fourth industrial revolution. Now this revolution, in the next 10 years, is supposed to bring changes to our lives. Changes that in the past 250 years we haven't experienced. So in the next 10 years, the profound changes you will see will far outstrip 2.5 centuries of changes. And don't forget, 2.5 centuries ago, there weren't automobiles, there weren't trains, there weren't aeroplanes. So if you conceive that, then you realize that we're living in exciting times and we're about to go for an exciting ride. Now, this will have a direct impact for us who lead companies. Things will change. Markets will become disrupted. New ways of working must evolve to be able to take into this. If you're in business, this morning, by evening, something will come up that will completely threaten your existing business model. Next slide, please. Now, while that technology is doing its stuff, it's changing in a rapid manner, there's also the population issue, which is very peculiar to Africa. While other countries of the world are slowing down their population growth, Africa is on the rise. And between now until 2030, the continent is projected to expand the size of its workforce by more than the rest of the whole world combined. That's in less than 10 years. And this is because everybody is fully aware we have a very burgeoning young population. So as this population is beginning to enter the workforce, we have this impact. According to the World Economic Forum, it estimates that between 15 to 20 million young people will join the African workforce every year for the next 2 decades. So for 20 years, expect 15 to 20 million people entering the workforce. As though that is not enough, by the same 2030, Africa will be home to more than a quarter of the world's population under the age of 25. And those 25-year-olds and below would form 60% of the total population of Africa. Now talk about what is called a young population, a young continent. And then by then, 15% of the world's working age population will be in Africa. 15% of the world's working population will be in Africa. And to compound matters, we also have an urbanization issue. Because 700 million people, that's more than 50%, will live in cities. The rural areas will not be attractive anymore. Next slide, please. Now, in the next slide, we will look at, everybody should try to see where he belongs. Some of us could be called traditionalists. And those are essentially people who were born before 1946. And typically, their characteristics in general terms, they are very loyal, they're very fiscally conservative, they have faith in institutions, and they're very self-sacrificing. Sounds like our grandparents and parents for some of us. And then you have the baby boomers. Those ones were born between 1946 and around 1964. These people, if you remember all the black riots, all the drive for democracy across the world, was driven by these baby boomers. And their characteristics are that they're very competitive, they're very optimistic, they're professionally eager to put their stamp on the world. That's what characterizes them. And then from 1965 to 1979, you have what we call the Generation X, Gen X. And these are independent, resourceful, skeptical, and entrepreneurial people. Then we come to the topic of today's discussion, which are the millennials. These ones were born between 1980 and typically 1999. They're characterized by being collaborative, they're extremely tech-savvy, being digital natives, and they're very diverse in their interests and very adaptive. And then we have the next generation that has already evolved, which will be the generation that will form those huge numbers, the under 25s I was talking about by 2030. And these ones are called, the millennials are sometimes called Generation Y, Gen Y, in some literature. So then you have the Generation H, which is also known as Generation Z. These guys are pragmatic, resilient, self-reliant, and very tech-innate. So technology is innate in them. It's not about being digital, there's no other option. Can't think anything. It was never anything. There was never a before when technology is concerned. Next slide, please. Now, as I mentioned, that the millennial generation is now roughly aged between 22 to 41 years, if you look at the previous slides that I showed you. And they are a very mobile generation, very restless, very, very restless. They're driven by experiences. They're not interested in artifacts. It's experience. They haven't everybody to know, take snapshots and show to the world. That's experience. That's what characterizes that generation. So they're the most educated generation so far. We don't know about the Gen Zs yet, but they have had the benefit, as mentioned previously by Dr. Kuka, that they have had the benefit of using technology to educate themselves. And even in the workplace, you will find that they can't understand, they don't work for employees, they don't wait for employees to train them. They believe it's your responsibility as an individual to train yourself. So they're culturally diverse, they generally hop between jobs, and then they like to have clear expectations, very open, they like frequent feedback because they grew up with technology. When they press a button, they want that feedback now. If they do something right, they want to see it as likes. So in the workplace, they want that continuous kind of attention. And then they love their flexibility, love doing their own thing. Like I said, it's all about experiences. Next slide, please. So in the next slide, I've gone deeper to talk about some of their characteristics. They're multitaskers. They can do many things at once. You're talking to a millennial, he's listening to his headphones, he's on his phone, you think he's not listening to you. He's hearing every word you say and it's probably actionable. They're good multitaskers. So as I said, they're tech-savvy and connected. Social media is their domain. Just like libraries were our domain, social media for them is where it happens. They're extremely curious, very, very curious. And this is of interest to leaders in companies and government organizations. Because curiosity is a soft skill that drives innovation. And so, like I mentioned previously, they love instant gratification and recognition. So they have problems with staying in jobs that they have to wait. If they do an excellent, do have excellent performance this week, they can't understand why you have to wait till the end of the year to evaluate them and then promote them. They can't, because they're so used to, if they do a TikTok video now and it is good, it will go viral in minutes. And so that is their mindset. So they're in a hurry. And then, like I said, they love their work-life balance. Next slide, please. The good, most fascinating thing about them is, despite this sense of appearing selfish, everything I've mentioned, they're excellent collaborators. They're team players. They move in flocks. They love their groups, and they probably don't see them physically doing it. But online, it's about community. It's about belonging. It's about that. So, and then they're authentic, and they love authenticity. They love transparency, and then career advancement, like I mentioned, is very big with them. And then they're also they love their diversity. Because of their experiences, because of technology, they love having friends and contacts and everybody where that generation is. Next slide, please. Right now as we speak, millennials are already 50% of the global workforce. So we're already there. Now, one thing to also note about them, despite the fact that they're 50% of the world population, they are, how do I put it? Because in many climes, except Africa, where we have a surplus, the birth control was the in thing. And so in countries probably like China, even within Africa and certain communities, the more educated people, there was the period when people stopped having 20 children and started settling for 4 children. So there are very few, they are still scarce. So you find that there will be a lot of global mobility. African millennials will have to move outside the continent to be able to fill vacancies in other countries. So you find that the brain drain that we witnessed previously has just started. Next slide, please. Now, I've painted a vision of what millennials are, and some people may be wondering, so how do I manage these kind of people? They're very different from me. They're very different from me. And don't forget that millennials, most primarily the majority of them are children of baby boomers. And that's where they got their spirit from. Baby boomers, remember, was the generation that was born between 46 and 64. They were the generation that moved democracy, they were liberal. So they imbibe some of those traits in their children. And eventually those traits melded with technology, and then you have what you have now. So we as managers and directors and leaders of companies, how do we manage the millennials? How do we manage them at the board level? How do we manage them in the workforce? So I think the most important thing is to provide flexible work arrangements. Many of us were reluctant to do that, but in a funny way, we have COVID to thank, because COVID saved us. We would have lost a generation. Because of COVID now, we realize what was impossible was actually possible. So COVID accelerated that. And so, and then secondly, they love regular feedback. So, thank you. You've done well. They don't do well, you tell them immediately. Don't wait for appraisals. They like that touch point, consistent touch points. And then education and professional development is very important. They're always learning new things. You would find somebody in technology, you'll be surprised at gentleman technology, you'll find him learning how to knit. You ask him why is he learning how to knit. He says he's not happy with the sweater he wore and he's thinking of starting a garment industry. That's a millennial. Just comes like that. And he will, if he likes what he's doing, he will abandon a career in technology and become a sweater once he's able to brand it on Instagram and get it going. That's them. Next slide, please. And then, okay, sorry. And then we have to provide meaningful vision and purpose also to them. they key into a larger vision, climate change. The company must be inclusive. It's not just about the employment, they must feel their contributing, they're put into something. You offer guidance and mentoring. They love the attention, they love learning. They are humble in that respect. They're willing to learn from anybody else. Then they like, you have to provide authentic and trusted leadership. The next slide, please. Now, if you notice, one of the key challenges as an organization now, if you are not thinking global, probably in a few years, you'll become extinct because the local competition may be too fierce for you to handle. It sounds funny, but that is the reality. So, advances in technology have allowed businesses expand beyond borders. We all know that logistics is a factor also. And then, but we, our generation, is afraid of globalization. So we're very risk averse. We believe only the big companies can take those risks. And I think that's where millennials will help with that because of the adept use of technology. Next slide, please. And going beyond borders is the reality. I'm sure everybody in this room is aware of the African Continental Free Trade Area Agreement that was signed between almost all the countries in Africa, which will open our borders and our markets across Africa. If you are not thinking of playing in this market, that's another death knell for your company. So millennials, with their global thinking, with their technology, will enable you harness this particular future. So, and to buttress that, despite political thinking of our generation, who are still political leaders, that nation states must reinvent themselves, go back to their cocoons. Millennials are global, believe in globalization. So a study that was done by Western Union across 15 countries proved that despite geopolitics, current geopolitics, tomorrow, this diverse group of tomorrow's future shapers are united by belief in a world of collaboration, unrestricted by geographic borders. Next slide, please. Now, my recommendations, just about 3 slides to go. So based on this canvas that I've painted, with technology, burgeoning young generation growing up in Africa, with the challenge of going global, I think you can see that millennials have a lot to bring to the table. And it's now that they're needed. I think this generation more or less was needed for them. So, being the first digitally native generation, I think they believe in instant access to information, technology on demand. All these things are things that will drive those areas that I spoke about. And then another thing also, as consumers, millennials are also responsible for changing lifestyle trends. They've changed the way consumption patterns are changed. Since they're going to be the majority, themselves and their younger brothers and sisters, we have to also watch them. And having them close to us, influencing how we design, how we target markets, I think it's very, very key. And then, so diversity at the board level is very, very important. While we still talk about other areas of diversity, I think it's also very important to keep in mind the generation. So millennials in the boardroom are essential for many reasons, including helping companies make digital transformation, targeting, slides. Go to recommendations. Next one. All right. Millennials in the boardroom are essential for many reasons, including helping companies make the digital transformation, targeting a new generation of consumers, and ultimately changing corporate culture. And I think that failing to include voices and perspectives of this younger generations will pose risks for business regardless of their industry. So in conclusion, I think there's a great opportunity for boards to seek younger directors and gain perspectives of a generation that is refining technology, consumer preferences, business strategy, business models, and even business risk. And then a millennial perspective at the board level can help organizations understand the world from the millennial lens, but also may help connect their organizations to specific marketplaces such as consumer trends. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Architect Mr. Zauri. What I would like to to ask the other discussants to give 5 minutes perspective on the subject, and then we'll open it up for discussion, questions and answers, and with interaction. Let's go digital first and see if Mr. Etobibe is there to join us and give a perspective digitally. Are you there?
Yes, I am. Yes.
Fantastic. Great when technology works. Probably set up a millennium.
Yeah. So I think that, first of all, Engineer Kazori, really impressive presentation. I haven't really, to be honest, I've never really seen the millennial generation broken down that well, and actually that accurately. I run an organization. Our average age is about 27, and really everything that you spoke about there really resonates in terms of management and a lot of things. So very impressive how within the time that you have, you're able to do this much research and put that together. I think that looking concerning, my views around millennial leadership, I think it's so important when you look at, look at sort of the genesis of Africa as a country, as a continent. Look at Nigeria as a country, and think about the age of people at the time when, when you need sort of like inertia energy, right, to move things from non-existence into existence, right? Because you need a certain level of what I would call boldness and belief in some things that don't exist, right? But believe that they can exist. And this is truly where I believe in tapping into sort of like that youthful energy to be able to move an organization forward. That's why with Dr. Kazari's presentation, you talked about their belief in a system. And I think that where millennials really connect to is basically the ability to see that even the organization itself can become something much that they can be fully proud of and really participate in, almost being part of that nation. What I found most important, I think, in terms of how you move leadership or how you get millennial leadership to influence an organization is, one, in areas of data and analysis. So I find that in most traditional organizations, these are areas that tend to be lacking. But I think that the way, like, you look at sort of the way a lot of things are, your mobile phone is analyzing itself, the mindset to analyze data, the mindset to get used to data, the mindset to request, be curious about data is there. And so I believe that the first set is basically how much your organization can become much more data compliant. Something else that even Dr. Yemi mentioned, which is very important as well, is that, you see, the real bridge between sort of experienced leadership and young leadership is data. And you see, once experience over time allows you to make consistent decisions without really understanding what the situation is, simply because there's a high probability that you've seen this situation numerous times, so you're most likely to make the right decision. Now, the only way to sort of bridge for that with young leadership is data, having information about the situation, enough information about the situation, so that you're able to make an informed decision. And I think that an organization that can blend very strong experiential leadership with a strong data and analytics structure can really become tremendous. And I think this is where they can come in. I think the other point as well is typically using technology to innovate and create the future of the organization. So what do I mean by this? A lot of times organizations say things like, we would like to be more innovative. We would like to be more technology driven. We want to go into the future. But what does that truly mean? Even in a society, it means that as an organization, you're going to have to rely on technology as the solution to your problem. So it means that your mindset has to, within the leadership team, is going to be one where you're actually defining your most critical problems will now be solved through technology solutions. And you see, it has to come from a place where the leadership must be conscious of the fact that we are going to create this dependency. The dependency on technology as a solution to your current problems. So your most, not just an novel thing, but your most critical problems, then forces the organization to look towards people that will understand how to take the organization there. Similar to how a society that relies on its universities for research to solve problems will ensure that the universities are working so that is where the solution comes from. It takes the same cycle. So that is what I also feel that technology can really, an organization can really benefit from sort of transition of millennial leadership, and how you can also ensure that where millennial leadership is very great at channeling an organization to create the greatest impact. So that would kind of be my contributions. Thank you so much. And my sincere apologies for being unable to attend. It was truly, truly unavoidable.
Ito, thank you very much. Very much appreciated with those views. I'll now ask Oswald to give his own perspectives.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for having me today. This is really a great, panel that the IOD has put together. It's actually a very interesting subject. When I first read what the topic was going to be, I was like, this is quite interesting, looking into how we can expand boards to add value to the company, which is the primary objective of a board. Listening to the presentation, it was quite comprehensive, had me thinking. I feel like now I need to start saying I'm Gen X in my introduction, not just my name and my title, but also to let people know that I'm Gen X, so they could adequately characterize me for the right positions and so forth. The presentation left me thinking about a number of things. One of them, the first one was, does your board resemble your market? Right? If we're trying to push into products and we're looking at this new market, how does our board resemble the market that we're pushing into? Have we taken the time to ensure that the board constitution matches the market that we're interested in, or the market of the future? I find that this is sort of an issue that we're having in a number of organizations. Young people are actually not interested in a lot of these organizations that we have. So how do we change? And these novel boards are more attractive because there's a monetary aspect to it. So when you start thinking about organizations like Nigerian Computer Society, for instance, they don't have a young, they don't have a young constituency. There's no young digital startup people. They're not there. So it's a problem that goes across not just boards like yours for companies, but also organizations that, in Nigeria that are supposed to be adding value, doesn't have the right balance of the youth in there. So it's for boards and organizations to look into the younger people and go, how do we transform ourselves to make us more attractive? I mean, granted, for boards of companies are obviously attractive because it presents a new opportunity. But I think that we need to ensure that we resemble the market that we're chasing. So that's the first point. The other one that the other question that I asked myself was, how does your board manage change? And how prepared is your board to handle change driven by technology? As we know, technology is moving, I mean, like I said, I'm a Gen X, it's moving too fast for me, right? So I'm not going to go on and say who else they should be moving faster for, but things are changing very quickly. This COVID period, I now tell people that I've ran projects with people that I've never met, right? I've met these people online, and we've done a lot of fantastic things, just from having digital meetings, Zoom meetings, and that itself is a very drastic change in how we work. That gives a sense that things are going to get a lot more advanced, a lot more creative in how we work going forward. How is your board prepared to adjust, to understand that, the way we work, the way the office is structured is going to change? It's not a question of if it's going to change. It's actually changing as we speak. The way the office is constituted, where people sit, who you're working with on projects, the different, if silos exist and how they're broken up to create new paradigms, all happening right now. How is your board prepared to handle that? Also, outside of technology, the presentation mentioned the idea of population growth. One of the key things that is interesting about Africa, and actually very, very exciting about Africa, is the fact that we are growing very fast. A lot of the other continents are actually aging. They're doing almost the reverse of what we're doing. We're getting a younger population. The numbers he said 60% under 25. That is amazing when you think about what that means, 20 years down the road. So from a board perspective, how are we positioning to ensure that we're taking advantage of that, right? We need to avoid the situation we get into where it's a new, lack of better words, a new form of slavery, in the sense that if we don't take a good sense of our population and our youth and engaging them and partnering them, and that's starting with getting millennials on board to get that new insight. How do we prepare our businesses to ensure we're engaging this interesting dynamic that we have, where we have 60% of our population under the age of 25? If we're not doing it, somebody else will. And you see it already. Going to Canada is is a marketing campaign. It's actually an industry in itself. And then working from home with companies abroad in odd hours has become something that's happening, and people are earning money that way. It's fantastic. But how do we build those BPO businesses that are local in Nigeria and exporting that talent out as opposed to exporting the people out? So that's sort of the change we need to look at from a board perspective. Then, I think I already mentioned that. So I'll skip over to how are we training the leaders of the future? It was just said just now, how do we ensure that the talent that sits in this room, the talent that sits in existing boards is transferred to the new generation that comes behind you? I think the only way we can do that is by ensuring that we're integrated on boards. There's a lot that you guys can teach the younger people, and counting myself in there, so that the knowledge is transferred and the knowledge is kept, that we understand why things were done, and we can always adjust it going forward on better ways to do things, obviously. But that knowledge shouldn't be broken. And one of the key ways of ensuring that doesn't happen is by integration of boards today, not tomorrow. Thank you.
Excellent, gentlemen. Thank you very much. So I'd like to thank Architect Yusuf for excellent presentation, putting the millennials question into great context. Itop talked about technology for millennials as a solution, the analytics, how you use that to bring about a different approach in leadership. Oswald talked about, does your board resemble your market? Do you really have to state your category? I'm actually Generation Y. And also, how do you think beyond borders? Some perspectives there. I just would like to just drop a thought before we started going into the questions and answers. Is the millennial question an absolute thing about age, or is it a thing of also mindset? You could have an individual that's 35, thinks like a 60-year-old because of their exposure, where they're coming from, and the way they see the world and the way they look to go forward. You could get a 70-year-old with a very young mindset, thinking and updating the way they think, open for new ideas, and very, very energetic, thinking about how to be transformative in the way they are. There's a saying that leadership is really knowing the point when you need to reinvent yourself. Therefore, as you go through a journey of life and leadership, at which point do you have to reinvent yourself to become the millennial of your own time, so you don't become obsolete, but you embrace the new technologies, the new environments, new ways of thinking, the new ideologies, or whatever it is that makes the individual current. So I'd like to say perhaps being a millennial is an approach in one way of a state of mind that we then consider with respect to how we apply that to leadership. So without saying much more, without much further ado, I'd like to ask some viewpoints from the audience and some questions for the panelists, please. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. My name is Dr. Kubi Udofia. I'm a consultant with Resort International Limited and a partner at Babalakin & Co. So mine is a question. I mean, we've heard so much about the opportunities, which the evolving technologies and growth beyond borders can attract for the millennials. So I would like the panelists to shed light on the potential risk and downsides of these emerging technologies and growth beyond borders. What should boards look out for in terms of the risk that may come with these evolving technologies, and how can they avoid this risk or mitigate the risk and the downsides of these evolving technologies and growth beyond borders? Thank you.
Okay, because we don't have millennials on the panelists, so that we forget the question, right? We'll take them as they come, because by the time you ask a different question, we'd have forgotten. So, so can I summarize the question? Is technology beyond borders, the risks involved, how do you mitigate some of the risks that might come with these technologies and so on. If that's right, would you like to have a go, you see?
So by the time I finish answering this question, you say I truly believe in millennials. I think the main risk through technology, of course, everybody hears of cybercrime. You know, as you become more technology dependent, so also you become more likely to become hacked. I think that's a reality you must live with. I think a survey was done. I can't remember exactly who did the survey, but there's a survey on cybercrime and ransomware. And it was discovered that at least 70% of American companies have already been hacked. And anybody who runs technology will be hacked. It's just a matter of when. But that should not stop you. We don't stop going into cars to go back home because we're afraid cars have accidents. We don't stop flying planes because we're afraid that, you know, a couple of planes have had accidents in the past. It's the reality of technology. And what you realize is, what you need to realize is, incorporating technology end to end is part of the solution. So that's why I said, when I answer this question, people will believe I really am advocating for millennials. Having millennials who are tech savvy on the board and making cyber security as a board item, a risk item that should be considered at board level, making technology planning and budgeting emanate from the board, I think are critical to mitigating some of the risks that you mentioned. Thank you.
Okay, Itop, do you have a comment to make to that?
Yeah, I think that, I mean, really from a risk perspective, I think the biggest risk always with technology is typically not adopting technology. I think with technology is actually not adopting it. I think that just like anything, you know, you would find that there are always challenges with every single solution, be it a technology-driven solution or not. But I think the biggest risk anyone really faces is the future and the way the future is going. If you look at today, you know, even the development of the metaverse, right, and what virtual reality and augmented reality, how that is going to play an impact. It's really they are really inevitable outcomes. So I think the bigger risk actually is how do you get the board to understand that there's really no future without it, and so investing in that future is really the right direction to go.
Thank you very much. And, you know, perhaps technology is a great opportunity for us to reach beyond borders. People talk about the brain drain that we're having of people actually leaving Africa, leaving Nigeria. It's possible to actually have brain exports without physically leaving the country. And leveraging technology, we're talking about this at lunch with a few people, that actually you could be earning foreign currency here, adding value by technology, and so many people are doing that now. Whether you're a seasoned board member providing insights across borders without necessarily having to travel, or a very sharp young professional just finding innovative ways to make money online and being very, very well rewarded for it. And usually cybersecurity comes down also to awareness and training. So perhaps, therefore, with the question that boards actually need to think about embedding awareness on cybersecurity risk in every individual, because it lives everywhere. All you need is one board member's mobile phone to be hacked, and the company could be intensely compromised. Any other questions, please?
Mr. Chairman, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, my name is Mohammed Mustafa bin Tube. cryptocurrencies, bitcoins, fintech, creating a lot of users, a lot of sellers and buyers at the global level. Here in Nigeria, we have serious issues about job creation. Now, how can we have our own, fintech companies up and coming, but how do we get these upcoming fintech companies to upscale job creation, just like it's happening at the global level? We need job creation. How do we use fintech, cryptocurrencies, and bitcoins to do that? Thank you very much.
Okay, so that's fintech, cryptocurrencies, job creation, wealth growth. Oswald, can you anchor that, please?
Great question. Great question. Thank you very much. So, what I would say is that we need more partnership between government and private sector when it comes to policy development. Oh, you can't hear me? Hello? Hello? Sorry. So what I was saying is that we need more partnership between government and the private sector when it comes to policy creation. In Nigeria, we have about 5 unicorns. Unicorns, if anybody doesn't know, are startups that have made $1 billion or valued at $1 billion. India in this year has about 38 so far that has crossed over. And when you look at the India story, what you find is that they focused on a number of areas: education, creating the enabling environment through policy and laws, and that created the environment for these companies to thrive. Now, when you look at our environment, we have all the ingredients, right? We have a teeming youth, as we've already discussed. We have very smart people. We're very creative people, very energetic people. And one of the most important parts is that we actually have the market. So we have the demand and we have the supply. What we now need is what I would call collaboration. I don't call it. Collaboration, right? To create the right policies that would enable us create the enabling environments for startups to thrive. So without going into particular situations, I know over the last year we've heard of different policy statements that have affected businesses or in the startup scene. One of the key things is how do the startup companies engage government, right? What is the engagement model? What's the engagement setup that allows them to one, have understanding of what the playing field is and also recourse, right? So what tends to happen now is a pronouncement is made and the company goes, this destroys my business, and that's sort of the end of it, right? But we don't have an opportunity to sit down and actually discuss how do we fix this problem. Now the problem, let me define the problem. They often say technology disrupts. That's great. One thing we never look at, which is from the government side, looking at the economy, is when you disrupt, what is that thing you are disrupting, right? What have you disrupted, and what is the impact to the economy? So when you're a startup, what you're looking at is, I'm doing a startup and I'm disrupting this. But from the economic view, what are you disrupting? And please give us a plan on when you will fill that gap you just created, right? So the example I always give, and it may no longer be true, but it was true at the moment when I identified it, was crypto activity was exactly the same amount of money as our drop in remittances. So the number of dollars that was coming into Nigeria from people sending money dropped to about the same amount of money that crypto increased by. So yes, crypto disrupted, but what was the impact on that on our dollar position? So there are a number of things like that happen, and we need to get ourselves in a position where government and the private sector, or government and the startup companies, can sit at a table and discuss the balance in the businesses to create an enabling environment. Thank you.
Itop, I'd like to throw this one at you. Given your experience with AutoCheck, Africa, Cars 45, Conga, and all the innovative ways you'd have looked at payments, coming in to disrupt markets, creating new streams of jobs, and so on. It's been a year of the unicorns, I guess, in Nigeria. So maybe AutoCheck will be the next unicorn, right? Perhaps you could give us some viewpoints on this, the opportunities and perspectives here.
Thank you very much. And to the gentleman who actually raised the question, I'm always very interested when I hear anything that involves sort of using technology as an accelerator towards job creation. Because primarily, my personal belief is that, going through Dr. Kalzori's presentation, you will find that some of the biggest things we saw there was the explosive youth population, right? And the real key thing, when you think about that number, right, that 25% of the world's working population under 29 is going to be warehoused in Africa. And it looks like a promising number, but it's also a time bomb in a sense where, if we typically don't get people, one, moving from being underemployed to being highly employed. And when you think about it, what do these people, what's the one thing that these people all have connected to them? It's typically, smartphones and mobile technology. This is really how we're getting to everyone. And this is really how we have to start seeing how we can increase productivity across the board. And so for me, it's so key in whatever it is that we do as technology companies to look at how you can upskill people and how you can create more productivity, right? Because at the end of the day, that is really where we want to be. So I think fundamentally, what I've seen over time is that one, I think a lot of the policies that are typically designed don't necessarily take a holistic approach as to how, because for me, I think if you look at the startups, if you look at, for instance, an example would be the Nigerian, sort of music industry and where it's reached. A lot of times, and just in general, not necessarily with startups, but just general business, right? It's just about creating an enabling environment. And I'm not particularly sure that has happened, very actively. And maybe the real thought basically is that really, what does that mean? For me, I simply think that, the first thing I particularly look forward to is when we can start looking at a lot of problems that we have and solving them with technology. I'll give you a very good example would be a company I met in Kenya and Nairobi, where the company typically it's an insurtech company, meaning that it's doing a lot of insurance technology things. And so what had happened was that the body that is in charge of insurance within Kenya itself came together and sat down with all the insurance companies and said, listen, for us to get ahead, for us to stay ahead within the continent, with the Free Trade Zone Act coming up, one of the things that we have to get ahead with is technology. So why don't we identify certain startups that are within this sector and present to them our most key problems and help them solve it? And that was just one use case. And I was actually quite surprised to hear how they had applied it. So for me particularly, I think that, the more you have a reliable, another good example would be, and I don't like to reference too much what happens to other clients because they are very different from where we are. But my basic view is that, there are a lot of things that we talk about policy, but really at the end of the day, if it's not geared towards solving real problems, and are we willing to make that bet? Are we willing to make that real decision to say, okay, look, listen, these certain sectors or these certain problems, we are going to be 100% dedicated towards solving them with technology. I think once we begin to do that, then we see the value in technology, then we create much more enabling policies. It's like a cycle. Then you get more technology companies that are created, they add more value, then you create more policies. So I think, it's almost like the first step is basically being very clear and very objective about what sectors or what things we want to do, that we will be 100% as a government or as policymakers, 100% dedicated on technology solving. I think taking that first step would typically lead to a flywheel, which would improve our dependence on technology and improve the impact on technology on the broader sectors that we are challenging.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Top, do we have any more questions? We got about, oh wow, plenty of questions now in the 5 minutes. Could we have the mic to the front here, please?
Yes, good afternoon, everybody. A very, very interesting
session. But when you listen to the presentations, you must have a sense of optimism about the future. You know, you see all the numbers about, 60% of the population being under 25, and all this growth and development. But my main challenge, and the question I have for the panel, is that a good number of that population, especially in our own geography, are uneducated. So we have this, I would say, small microcosm of people who, yes, are at the cutting edge, who are operating across borders. But within our own space here, our policies are leaving so many of those generations behind. And rather than many of the positive things that we're talking about, we actually have this huge population of uneducated young people that, if we are not careful, will actually act as a counterforce and actually drive us in the other direction. So my question is, how do we evolve policies and actually make use of technology to see how we can come up with all-inclusive solutions that somehow bring all those other people along? Because I'm afraid if we don't, the future might not be as bright as we're expecting. Thank you.
I think we're running out of time. I'll take one more question from, there's a lady there, just next to you there. Yes, yes, please, yes.
Panelists and members, thank you for this very wonderful session. But there is something that I'm really looking forward to connect with this session. My name is Temi Nelson. I'm the Executive Director of Finance for NIMET. From the theme for this year, it says deepening corporate governance practice through multi-sector and multi-generational collaboration. The multi-generational collaboration challenge here is that the generation X, Y, Z and the millennia we are dealing with are really not patient to take knowledge transfer from oldies like us. Now, by the time the AI and the machine learning and the robotics complete the translation of our brain cells into chips, what and how do we on the board, how do we catch up to transfer what we have, the multi-generational experience we have? How do we succeed in transferring it before we are turned robotics? Thank you.
Thank you very much. I would like to hold that's the last question in the room here. Oh, there's a gentleman, he's been putting his hand up there, and that'll be the last one, because we have a couple online here I'd like to read before we close out.
Thank you, Chairman, for that opportunity. So my question is very simple. We have seen the theme of this conference, deepening corporate governance practice through multi-sectoral and multi.
Can you speak up, please? I think a lot of people.
Hello, sir. Okay. So the theme of the conference is very clear. So my question, from what the paper presenter talked about, he painted a very big picture of the demography. So I'm asking the Institute of Directors, maybe the president can help me answer. What efforts are the director, the Institute of Directors making to ensure that the corporate governance is reviewed? The current code of corporate governance by Financial Reporting Council, CBN and other organizations, what efforts are they making to review the governance code to ensure that millennials are given opportunity to rise to the position of directors? So, and then to answer one of the questions answered, a good corporate governance practice can help to tame the risk somebody was trying to talk about, and as well as the enterprise risk management practice. Those are the two things. If they're in place, governance practice and the risk management practice, if they're in place, whatever risk the millennials possess, aside from cybersecurity, the way they think is a risk is also. But the governance practice will help to them the way they think and the way they want to move.
Okay, thank you very much. So what I'd like to suggest is this, right? That we will hold that thought for the Institute of Directors to come in to answer that question that you placed on governance modifications or transformations, or to take it into account. So we'll hold that thought for now. Perhaps a comment on the question around policy, and then also knowledge transfer, openness to knowledge transfer. You categorized it in the presentation, perhaps a viewpoint, and then we'll take a couple of online.
Okay, we'll take the online question. I think population is a double-edged sword. You have to have a plan for everybody. And that's when that burgeoning young population I painted a picture of will become an advantage to Africa. If you noticed, I was very optimistic to even say that we will become net exporters of managers because of the demand for that category, because of the aging population across countries. Now, it's impossible, even from day one, to be able to educate everybody to the same level. Not everybody would become a graduate. Not everybody will become a master's degree holder, and on and on and on. But the same solution, if you noticed, if I mentioned, I mentioned that outside of policy, millennials are self-starters. They like to learn. They learn on their own. They like to learn. If given the opportunity and access to the technology, you would find that they would learn. And then also, if, for instance, you take advantage of the free trade agreement, as an example, that's a policy. If harnessed properly, it would create the sort of that would employ several millions of whatever you're doing with technology. Ultimately, there's going to be a production. If you're going to be exporting biscuit, whole value chain behind how biscuit package. And so there's a space for every particular level participant. So if you're a farmer, a basic farmer, you produce wheat, a part of that value chain, and on and on. So like you mentioned, it's really about policies and education, being able to recognize education should not be being able to recognize that this education, these millennials are going counts for something. Your ability to do is more important in some areas. That has been the trend in the creative arts. And you'd find that if you come as a graduate and you're unable to code camp, you're out. I'll take a secondary school or who can code and give him the task. And I think really that's, for me, is the high level response I will give to this.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. I just, a couple that we have online. I don't want to leave this event with the mindset that the generational groups determine the future of our evolution. I think the message is to look at the attributes of these generations and key into them to embrace the technology required. I liked the 35 years old thinking like a 70-year-old and vice versa. So just wanted to be sure that I'm not alone. Sounds to comment, you're not alone. You'll never. Is it time to have a new approach for board engagement? For example, leveraging technology on a more regular basis rather than once a quarter. It appears 4 times a year is not enough for the board to cover the issues the board needs to deal with, at least at an adequate level. So that's an very interesting thought, and no doubt quite a few boards are already starting to have dynamic engagement, and you can join Zoom on your phone or whatever. We have to close out because the next speaker is ready, I understand, in a minute or so. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank everybody in the audience with their questions, the great panelists and friends that have joined a great, interesting discussion. Just a last thought, and there was a mention of diversity and artificial intelligence. On that AI thing, not much to be said. I'll just leave that thought. What does it mean for boards? And diversity is not necessarily down to, is it male or female or old or young or black, green, blue, white or yellow. Diversity is a holistic look at real diversity that adds to a transformative board. Whatever it is, hold on to that diversity, and I bet you AI is the next disruption for boards going forward. Thank you very much.